So, as you know, this month's theme is Underdog. And I think we've all experienced a time in our lives in which we felt like we weren't fit for the task at hand, that we were less than, not as talented, underqualified, encountered more obstacles than others, or even just simply that we weren't supported in our endeavors. An underdog is someone expected to lose. Statistically, the person with the most reasons to fail than their opponent. The underdog has to acknowledge and overcome not only the downfalls and hindrances as perceived from others, but the internal pressures that they put on themselves. Today, I'm going to be interviewing Chelsey Carter. Chelsey is a St. Louis native now based in Chicago. She attended the Art Institute Chicago, launched her brand Alex Carter in 2015. Chelsey focuses on the abstract for inspiration for her designs. Her designs are unisex, catering to customers who are risk-taking and statement-making. Her jackets have been seen on SZA and Chance the Rapper, and she has been featured in Vogue Italia as well as many other publications. And I'll stop sharing so we can start the interview. Chelsey, I'm so happy to have you here.
Hey, I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for asking me to do this and for creating a platform for me to speak from. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So I'm thrilled to talk all things Chelsey Carter, your creativity, your career, inspiration, but all of these questions are going to somehow relate to the theme Underdog. So let's just start with this. In your own words, and just short and simple, what is the definition of an underdog?
The definition to me of an underdog is that people are betting on you to fail.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's like almost like a guarantee, you know?
Right. Okay, I just want us to kind of keep that in mind because I want to circle back around to that later, but betting on you to fail. Okay. All right, so let's talk about your background a bit. You moved around a little bit as a kid. You had a lot of responsibilities growing up, just helping to take care of siblings and supporting your family in general. But you clearly had this creative ability that was acknowledged in school. You loved to paint. So my question for you is, when were you first consciously aware of your desire to make art? And was creativity an outlet for you with all of these other external pressures and changes happening in your life?
You said, when did I decide to make art?
Or when were you consciously aware that, for your desire to make art?
I believe that it happened around high school when I was transitioning from being, a high school student into being a college goer. And I wanted to figure out an outlet that I could travel or embark upon that allowed for me to express myself freely and with no boundary and just very colorfully and meticulously in a lane that wasn't, school and, testing, the basic social studies, math, science and reading and things like that. I wanted to, I needed an outlet at that time because during high school was a bit of a rough time for me. And so I used it as therapy in a way to really hone in on my expressive value.
It sounds like art was the subject that didn't have boundaries, where every other subject kind of has, the checklist of things that you have to learn.
Exactly. It's very free for all. And then the more time that you invest into whatever field you'd like to go down is how you can start concentrating it, right? And fine-tuning your own set of skills. But art as a whole, yes, it's very open and free, for that reason, I think.
Right. Great. So now that you knew art was something that you wanted to pursue, did you find yourself defining what good art meant or looked like And how has that definition sort of evolved?
I think that when you're young, you naturally compare yourself to everything and anything around you just because there's an abundance. You're still trying to figure out who you are, what makes sense, and what feels right. But at that age, you don't know. You don't know yet, you know? And so good art to me at the time was very finite lines and perfection. Everything looked very clear and clean cut. And at the time I had very loose drawing style. And it was very sketchy, if that makes any sense. I never had a fine line that I would use to draw self-portraits or, you know, still life, anything with that. So I instantly always felt as if my work was not as good because everyone else's that I would deem, you know, good art was super pristine lines. And I was looking at my style thinking, wow, it's really rough and it looks very dark. But then my teacher told me, you know, this is just your style that you have, and it's the way in which you communicate, you know, your art. So there's nothing wrong with it, you know. So then that was when I started to understand that defining it isn't something that I needed to do. It didn't need to be boxed in. It was my style, and it could grow to get better, and I could pick up on techniques to, you know, become more expressive. But the way in which I was using, you know, the pen and paper to express myself wasn't wrong at all. And it wasn't bad art. It was just my art.
Mm-hmm. I love that. It sounds like your art instructor during high school was super influential.
She was very good. She was very good. And she was very patient and transparent. And she always made me feel very welcomed and understood, which I think is a challenge in high school. College is different. But in high school, you are so moldable, right? Because you still are trying to figure out so many aspects of the direction in which you're going to travel, who you're going to become, what's going to be the, you know, end all be all for you, you know, and then they're getting you at the peak of that moment. And so you're very spongy, you absorb everything. So yes, she was extremely influential, so patient. She had 2 daughters that she never showed favoritism to. I'll never forget this. They were always in our class. And in fact, they were sport students. And, you know, they were heavy in track, heavy in volleyball and things like that. So, and I could tell that she wanted them to be in art as well, but she never pushed them to do it, you know? She was just really knee deep into art, and she supported her children in what they wanted to do as well. So I respected her on a whole scale, as in addition to her being my teacher.
Right. It's kind of interesting because just the way that she wasn't pushing them into something that they weren't interested in, she was also helping you to find your own style without feeling pressured to meet that perfection.
Right.
You know, that's great. I love that. So at some point in time, I think it was the same instructor, suggested that you make a change from painting to fashion. So did this make you second guess your abilities as a creative person, or how did you pivot to empower this new direction without feeling discouraged?
I pivoted because sometimes you can just feel it in your gut, right? When you are making a decision that best serves you, you know, it's instinctful, but it also feels right. It felt right for me to transition from wanting to be like a fine artist to designer. She sat me down and she just said, you have a very distinct style. It's effortless. I've noticed that you've done little things during class or before class, or you'll talk about it with another student. Would you be interested in getting a BFA in, you know, fashion design? And so I was like, I'd never considered it. So I told her that, you know, applications for college, you know, they were super thick at the time, and they were very, there wasn't really a whole lot of digital based things. So she was like, if you're overwhelmed by it and by any means, I can help you figure it out and we can go through it together. which I thought was very sweet and very kind, because we met after class. So this was something that she did, outside of class hours. And so I told myself that, if I were accepted into this, this institute here in Chicago, that I would give it a shot, because why not, and at the time I was going through a rough time. My mother was at the height of her addiction, and she wasn't home a lot, and I was very young, and I was being, made responsible for my brothers at that time. And so there was a lot weighing in on me. So I needed to make the step, because college, my father told me it was non-negotiable. I was going, obviously, which I always wanted to go. But, location-wise was a thing. I wanted to do Paris or New York. They said no to that instantly. So I settled on Midwest area, in comparison to where my mother's from, St. Louis, and my father being from Ohio. So I told myself that taking that leap was a push in being selfish for myself, because I had been sacrificing so much, and I needed to make a conscious decision to better not only my career choice, but my life, and explore all possibilities, step out on my own, really step firmly into independent thinking, independent living, and being an independent creative as well. So it was the best decision I've ever made in my life, but it was also a really hard one to make at such a young age for myself, but I did it, and here I am now today.
Successful designer. So it sounds like, this decision to pivot into fashion was actually really easy, and it just worked out because it was almost meant to be in a way, and your instincts told you, yes, this is right. But then all of the pieces kind of fell into place with school and, getting accepted, and you decided to go to Chicago.
Yes.
And attend the Art Institute. And you learned a lot, but you also made some of your own opinions about some of the traditions or commonalities of the fashion world. So what were some of those realizations, and how did you form your own opinions to ultimately kind of build your own path?
So they teach you, which I think is super silly and not really that beneficial at all, to get a job in retail when you are a fashion design major, right? And there is an aspect of that is very needed, because you do need to see the hand, you need to see the type of demographic of people that are buying from bridge to high end. You need to know how to cater to them. How to, if getting into wholesale accounts is something that you want to do as an independent designer, having that experience is helpful, but becoming a retail, career person is not needed. You need to get your feet wet. You need to start putting product out and doing it a completely different way than what I was taught. So I worked everywhere, because my counselors and advisors told me to. I worked everywhere from Abercrombie and Fitch on up to Cole Haan, being the only Black female worker that Cole Haan had at the time. And, I started to develop leadership skills. I started to develop communicative skills and ways to get my point across without coming off as demeaning or disrespectful in any way. Playing as a team and being, prompt and punctual, being someone who you can rely on. Those are all things that I learned from being a retail girl. And how to make your money stretch, because you don't get paid a lot of money in retail at all, and it is not flexible. So I learned in college how to, make your money stretch, that whole aspect of that, because you don't get paid a lot. And then it wasn't until I met my best friend, still to this day, at a restaurant, who's working as a waiter. I wasn't interested in being a waiter until I met her, because I was always noticing how much money she always had. I'm like, oh, we are both in college. How do you always have this amount of money on you at all times? And the flexibility to do a beach day, or, to go to a movie, or she always had availability. And so availability was something that I deeply wanted. And, if you know retail, that's not something that you're ever granted. You have to work holidays. I mean, it's all the time. So I got a job at a restaurant and as a waiter, and I worked my way up. I became lead waiter. I would train everyone who would come in and talk about the, bottle service and how to up your tickets and your tables and, all of those things. And was asked to do management, but then that required more of my time. So I said no. So I stayed as a waiter for a while. And honestly, that was the best job that I've ever had. And it taught me literally the most that I've learned to date. School, retail combined. And I say that because, you really learn who you are as a person, how to approach people, your people skills. You have to walk up to a table of strangers. Oftentimes you won't know the number until they sit down. So you might be overwhelmed at going to a tin top, and you have to instantly make them your friends, and they have to trust you in a matter of 45 minutes, which is a very hard job to do. So reading crowds and reading rooms was something that I developed there. Juggling more than one thing at a time, which is, I think, what all entrepreneurs do, right? With the trays and the different drinks and the different orders, I would challenge myself and hit multiple tables at a time, see how many orders I could remember by hand, in my head, and not write anything down. And that started to sharpen up my skill of multitasking. And, my managers were amazing. I had some of the best managers that are still supportive to me today in waiting and in the restaurant industry. And I learned how to be a good leader, and I learned what type of managerial style I wanted to replicate in my own business endeavors and the type of role model I wanted to be there. So it taught me, I recommend that everybody get a job at a restaurant because it will teach you so very much. A lot. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember talking with you about this, and you told me a story that was, there was so many elements to it. It was, about mistakes and about support. And from what I just heard you say here, it seems like all of your retail experience and school, that's all hard skills. Those are things that are technical, you can learn, but the soft skills and really being genuine and vulnerable stemmed from a totally different industry.
Yeah.
But you seem to have brought that into your brand. So let's talk about your brand, Alex Carter, and how these lessons have influenced your designs.
So the brand in itself began as a women's wear label because I knew nothing about menswear at all. I didn't know how to dress them. I didn't know how to, drape, pattern, anything for a man at all. So it actually started as a women's wear label, and I was raised predominantly from my grandmother, who had a very, chic, distinct, but also very respectful and conservative style. And I got a lot of my style and, fashion inspiration from her coming up. So because that was her style, I always loved when, women would walk in a room and they were sexy and sensual, but you didn't see a whole lot of their skin, and then they weren't in something that was super showing and body conscious. So that was the mission from the beginning, to show or give women confidence, to be sexy and sensual without showing every aspect of their, body. That was the goal. And I wanted to do a neutral color palette. I didn't want to touch any vibrant colors. And then I started to transition into wanting to embrace challenges. I've always been, you learn from challenges, you learn from falling, you learn from making mistakes. So I didn't want to stay too comfortable. So I started to broaden the demographic of, who I was catering my clothes to. So women in and now, and also colors. I just did, the hues collection where I did black, red, green, blue, and that was very new for me because I was doing only neutral things before. So yes, I think that it's evolved, but out of necessity over the years, just out of me wanting to be better, out of me wanting to showcase more, and out of me wanting to make sure that I'm properly conveying to everybody who's watching or buying that, you know, there's no ceiling to the things that I can do. And if I don't know how I'm going to do it, I'll do the research, I'll do the work and figuring
I love that. No ceiling to what I can do.
it out.
That's super empowering though. You know, there's a lot of people that I think, you know, who are feeling like the underdog, that think they are kept under that ceiling, whatever it is. And being able to say, no, it's okay. You can break out of that. It's more of a mindset than it is, you know, a skill level, you know?
Right. Absolutely.
So in school, you did focus a lot on androgyny, and I know you said that you started as a women's brand. And how has that changed? Are you designing for men now? And how has this, you know, kind of androgyny influence your design? And is it because of the sense of equality in clothing, or how did you come to decide that that's what you wanted to do?
Well, I met this guy. No, I'm just kidding. I've always had more male friends than female friends. I've just been able to connect with guys. I have a lot of brothers. I have 2 dads, you know, so I'm very comfortable around men. And I was at Thanksgiving, I believe, in Ohio one year, and you know, my Uncle Mike, my Aunt Yolanda's husband, he was telling me, you know, why don't you fly under the radar? You should just go with Alex Carter. And I was like, oh my God, it's perfect, because, you know, my full name is Chelsey Alexandria Carter. And so at the time when I was doing the androgyny project for college, my teacher, you know, advised me. She said that, you know, a lot of women don't like for women to tell them what to wear and what to do. So, and then the subject was androgyny. So I was like, oh, if I ran under this unisex title and name, and then I come out at the end of my designs and you see that I am a woman, that would be kind of like a really cool play on my sex and the owner and operator of this brand. And then it's also very clear to say, no one will ever misspell it or mispronounce it. Because it also is very American to me, but also short and sweet. So the development of the name started from a conversation with my uncle over Thanksgiving dinner one year. And then I ran with it because I think that it continues to embody the concept of that no ceiling type of thing. Like, don't box me into any sort of person or, you know, one entity, right? I'm a multifaceted woman who's capable of doing anything and everything I set my mind to. And that includes catering to men now as well. But that started out of conversation with friends. And hey, do you offer anything for us? You got sweatpants, you got crew necks, like what do you, suits, whatever it is. And I, realized that I was receiving 50% of what I could do, in theory as well, only women. But now if I opened up the floodgate of that as well, then I would be thus opening myself up to more money, and a larger demographic, larger audience, way more clientele. So I started to introduce little things like little seeds, unisex crew necks, unisex sweatpants, unisex t-shirts, and just to kind of test the waters with men. And it was super receptive, and then that took off,
Yeah, no, I love it because you told me, based on your experience from the service industry, that the customer is always right, and how that's really become ingrained into your brand too, and just listening to what people want. And your brand represents that because it's flexible, it's universal, but that also makes it approachable and able to evolve with you, but still be that approachable name and idea that you can create for the evolving needs of whoever you're creating for. So I love that.
Thank you.
So of course I have to ask you about your experience on Project Runway. And when we talked about it, you said you didn't win, but you still won. What did you mean by that?
I think that everyone in my hometown, well, not everyone, but everyone that I knew when I left, and a lot of the heavy hitting people that matter in the city of Chicago know what I do and what I'm capable of, right? My integrity. But I think that I was missing a larger platform to speak from, not only as a designer, a female Black business owner, but just a larger space where I can make it more visible to young Black girls across the world that anything is possible and your dreams are super obtainable. You just have to stay the course, you know? And when I was becoming inspired to do this, I never saw a Black girl, doing, I knew no Black women in any of the houses, no creative directors that were like, or pattern makers or anything like that. So it kind of also started as me becoming a vessel to what that looks like. I mean, now we have a little bit more than we did when I was in college, but I wanted to embody, what it could look like if you were to stay the course within this industry, what types of things you're going to say with your platform and with your microphone, what types of messages are you going to put out or convey with your messaging or your platform or, whatever it may be. And so everything has been very intentional. I went on the show, obviously, with the hopes to win, but I say that I won anyway, even though I was eliminated, because I now have little girls that are calling me or messaging me or emailing me, asking me about that I would have never met had I not, been on the show, how they can go about obtaining their dreams within this industry and ways in which they can perfect and define their style and how I can be of service to them, and now there are so many people who know who and what Chelsey Carter and Alex Carter is, and I think that is what I needed and what I wanted, ultimately they made their decision and I'm not even mad at it because I did what I needed to do. It's how I genuinely feel. I learned a lot. I met a lot of amazing people on the show, the contestants, and I'm forever changed because of the experience. But I will say I definitely sew faster though. I sew a lot faster now. Just out of because the timing, right? And I'm also used to sewing now without music on because we couldn't play any music, which was never a thing for any of us.
Interesting. That's crazy.
Yeah, we always watched a movie or like played a song or like put on a podcast in the background, just about all of us. And so that was super weird. So before I left, I started to turn off the phone and started to turn off the music and started to work in solitude with myself to prep myself. I was putting myself on time restrictions right before leaving so that I would be ready to go when I got there. But nothing prepared me like the actual experience of the show.
What was the reasoning behind no music and no media?
Well, it was copyright. They couldn't play any music that they didn't own the rights of. And then audio, they wouldn't be able to pick up on any conversation that, we would be having amongst ourselves or, with the person working next to us. So,
gotcha.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So it seems like you learned a lot as far as like challenging yourself and your abilities, but you also, the bigger purpose was becoming this icon for potential for young Black girls and showing the world that this is something that's possible. Like this is something that anyone's capable of. That's great.
Absolutely.
I love it.
It was very, very, very important for me. I came from a long line of strong Black women that were educators and, educated. And I wanted to make sure that stayed very, very relevant and that I looked visibly as if I was a product of that, So the way in which I spoke, the compassion that I had for my competitors, the no sweat off my back vibe that I, like, okay, cool, I'm out, cool, was very, very important to me, because it gets no more public than television.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, I definitely want to thank you for this interview, but open it up to our audience members here. So I'm going to turn mine on gallery view so I can see everyone. Feel free to turn your cameras on. And if you have a question, type it into the chat, and then we'll ask you to unmute and ask your question to Chelsey.
Please.
So I know
While we're
Emma.
waiting, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I know it's really early everywhere, not just in Chicago. So I want to take the opportunity to thank Creative Mornings, but also everyone that, took time out of their morning to come and listen to me talk. I appreciate it.
I had a question.
Yeah.
Sure.
I was wondering, what messages you want to use your platform and your brand to convey. I know, like, we've sort of talked somewhat on that subject, but it'd be great to just hear it from your words and your perspective, Chelsey.
Absolutely. Thank you, Emma, for the question. The messages that I will first is that, it's possible, in terms of that visibility and me not seeing it in college at all. I want to be the example of what that could look like. And even if it's not design, you want to be a pattern maker, creative director, photographer within this industry. It's possible. I want to be either a touchstone to get you further or introduce you to someone, or to guide you in a way, in some sort of mentoring process. The other messaging is that Black women are pivotal to life on this earth and everything thereafter. No Black king can be born without one of us. And to also amplify the struggles of what that looks like from before I was born, since before my mother was born and my grandmother. The strength that we embody and how it's come most times, if not oftentimes, from places of pain and being pushed to do things even when you're at your limit. Processes of business ownership and what that looks like for Black women in America. The struggles of our counterparts and how we have to speak eloquently and femininely to men that can say and be rude in different work settings, but when we do it, there's so many different things that, I want to continue and start amplifying and talking about in my messaging. But first and foremost, just continuing to support, better, and encourage the Black female community, beginning first with the members in my family, but also teenage girls, college girls, and everyone in between.
Thank you. I can see so much courage and strength, and you inspire me.
Oh, thank you. Oh my goodness. Y'all cannot make me cry before 10 a.m. Not gonna happen. Thank you. So the questions are coming at the bottom, but they go away after a while, so.
Okay, I do have one from Debbie. She wants to ask a question, but she doesn't have a microphone. She says, how long was your time in actuality in New York for Project Runway? And would you consider to be on PR All-Stars or even making the cut? I think your designs are amazing, very clean with fine lines, and what would you suggest for young aspiring designers? Wait tables and what else? So a couple of questions. How long was your time on Project Runway, and then what would you suggest for young designers?
I don't know what I'm actually allowed to say just yet still from production and shooting, but it was a very long time. My summer was gone by the time, I left. We left around the middle or the beginning of June. I did not return until the very, very last week of July. It was almost August. I'd been home for exactly a week on the 3rd of August. So that's like a little over 30 days or it was like, I know for a fact I was gone for like 40 plus days, which was very hard to do. Oh my God, it was so hard to do. So that part was a struggle, being taken away from everything that that's normal to you, your music, your phone, your family, no internet, and those little finite details that you take for granted. Honestly, I took for granted, and being stripped of those things in order to really show up in a real way for the show and for the competition, with no distractions, it was really hard. But about 40 plus days, I was away. And then what's the second part of the question?
The second part was, would you consider being on Make the Cut or, yeah?
No to making the cut. I would consider All Stars. But I don't know how that process goes because it's different than the initial season. With all, I think that it's a little bit more specific and very selective for All Stars. So I don't know that I made enough of an impression to go back for All Stars. But I know that top 8 was really good. Making it to top 8 was pretty good. That's 2 before they make the decision. So I did really well for myself. And I think I did make a really good impression on the audience, but I don't know, the decision makers. I don't know. I would be interested in doing All Stars, for many reasons, some of which I can't talk about, but the reward I think is worth it for All Stars. And I'm sorry, Samantha, tell me the other part of the question.
Part number 3, what would you suggest for young aspiring designers?
I would advise 2 things. 1, stay the course. That's a really simple statement, but there are so many creatives that do not stay the course. And it is so easy to not stay the course, right? Because of finances, because of family, somebody passed away, or because of jobs or breakups or mental wellness. Staying the course ensures success in whatever it is that you're doing. You want to learn how to bake, you're cooking every day, great. You're buying new recipes, you're putting yourself in different settings to where you can become the best baker. It's going to ensure that you'll be one of the best bakers within your family and within your network because you're consistent in it, right? So stay the course, and don't let up on whatever, it is. And then the second thing that I would say is I'm getting more acquainted with what this looks like now for myself, but create systems that help you to sustain. And that is across all fronts, right? Like your mental wellness, your business managerial skills, your organizational skills, your communication skills, every aspect of anything that you're doing, create systems that are going to help you sustain your business or whatever it is that you're doing. And, there are many books out on systemic, sustainability, but just to blanket the advice, I would say create systems that are going to last. Yeah.
That's great advice. I love that.
Thank you.
Looks like Emma has another question. Emma, do you want to unmute again?
Sure. And now I have 2 questions, but I'll just ask one. So I was curious about the unplugging while working piece and how you said that that was a really big difference for you and really difficult. And I was wondering, did that influence your work, your mindset, or your process in a meaningful way?
I think that the overall experience for Project Runway was meaningful in ways that we don't even have time in the Zoom to discuss. It was meaningful to me on like a super internal level. And I say that because I'm a Leo. I don't know how many of us in here are like into zodiacs at all, but I'm a Leo, and most Leos are very confident, and they assume the role of leadership, and they can kind of walk in a room and just like get it done or take charge, right? But I am confident because I've had to be. I'm not necessarily the most confident person. I don't like public speaking, and I don't like being put on the spotlight. I've fallen into this because of the show, right? And so it seems like I'm comfortable with it, and maybe it does, or but the show solidified my confidence and being the way that I look on camera and how I come off and the way in which I'm able to articulate what it is that I'm saying, which affirms you in a very rooted way, if that makes any sense. So having to unplug, and that was the result, it's helped my processes in a way that I think was needed and will be implemented moving forward. Now I can work in silence, which I think, you shouldn't need anything to do what you love. There should be no requirement other than tools and equipment, right? But you shouldn't have to have the room pitch dark or have to have the room very light. You should be able to me, in my opinion, you should be able to bring whatever it is that you're passionate about to life, no matter what the restraint is. And that is why they did that. They did that because you should be able to do this. You should be able to perform. If you're here, if you made it to this platform, you should be able to do what we think you should, under every and any circumstance. So the process has gotten more confident, if anything, and more sure, and more solidified. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it certainly does. Sorry, I got a package delivered to my house while you were in the middle of answering that question.
Okay.
Quarantine days. No, I love that answer too. It almost makes it more focused or meditative,
Yeah, like centered. I'm just like becoming one with the space. The space is becoming one with me. My work is becoming one with the space and me. Like, it's just, there's all these cameras all around, which was super distracting and very so you always wanted to be like on your square, right? Because there's all these cameras at any point, and they're trying to find something that's going to be worth sharing on television. And I never gave it to him. Never did. So you also I learned a great deal of what really genuinely matters in this industry and what doesn't, to me. And I think that, that was also really, super cute to be able to have. And it's so funny because now I'll go somewhere and people are like, oh my God, aren't you on Project Runway? And I'm like, that was a very long time ago. You have no idea how that makes me feel that you still think I'm relevant to that, and you can still see, yeah, I mean, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
It's awesome that you were able to gain so much from it. It sounds like it was a really rewarding experience.
It was, in more than one way, and I'm very grateful to Bravo and the team and the crew and the competitors and the production team. Their production team was so incredibly great. Like the best. Oh my gosh, so good. Yeah, we talk about it all the time. Brittany and I and Delvin and I, we talk all the time, like maybe 3 times a week. And we talk about how it's weird now working in a space by ourselves. So we oftentimes will call one another and just put them on FaceTime, and sometimes we'll talk, sometimes we won't, and we'll just work because we're so used to having one another in a space as we're trying to crank things out. So yeah, which is kind of weird, but
get some human interaction.
Yeah.
So I'll ask the last question. This kind of goes back to your definition of underdog that we talked about in the beginning. Now that you've reflected on some of your past experiences and challenges, how do you relate to your definition of underdog, which is someone expected to fail?
Well, being a Black woman right now, and even before now, we are underdogs, Black men underdogs, but being on the show and not winning, and what I've seen that do to people in previous seasons, and how they kind of went silent a little bit. Being an underdog, I want to be an underdog. The underground art and the underground music scenes of cities, which is also underdogs, are always the most hungry for their dreams or their ambitions. And I think it's because they've been kicked so many times that it's by any means necessary now, And so I never want to be in a position where I'm at the pinnacle of fame or at the highest peak of notoriety, because then that means I'm too far from those that are still hungry enough to do anything in order to make it happen. And so that gap, to me, I don't ever want it to be too big or exist really at all, because I am a product of underdogs, and I will continue to be an underdog because there's not going to be a ceiling of how far I would like to go and how far the future generations, my children eventually, I don't ever want them to think, okay, I can stop now because I've made it and I've gotten to that point. Because essentially there should never be a point that you reach where it's enough, So the definition has absolutely shifted for me now, because I feared it before and now I want to remain now.
Snaps. I love it. Hands. Thanks, Emma. Well, thank you so much, Chelsey. This was such a great conversation. Tell everyone where they can find you and how to follow you. What's next for Chelsey Carter?
What's next is I have some projects and some things that I can't really talk about, but if you are online and you follow me on any of the socials, you will hear about them soon. It is going to be a busy year for me. We're getting married. There's a lot going on this year. Thank you. Thank you so much. With COVID and everything, it's been a lot of shifting with that. So expect me to be a Carter Sanders soon. And then you can find me on social media, Instagram at Alexandria Carte. So it's AlexAndrea and that's the same handle for Twitter as well as Instagram. The website is shopalexcarter.com. And if you also have questions that you didn't feel comfortable asking here today, you can always email them to me at alex@shopalexcarter.com. I do answer and operate all of those channels. So when you do hear a response, it will be me.
That's a job in itself.
It is. It is a full-time job too. It's crazy.
We posted all those links. Yeah, thank you. We posted all your links in the chat. So if anyone's curious on how to find Chelsey, you can find her. I do have one last question though.
Please.
Are you designing your wedding dress? I
am, with help from cast members from my season.
That's amazing. I can't wait to see it.
It's going to be, oh my God, so good. It's going to be very different for me, but also very good. Yeah, I'm excited.
I can't wait. Good deal. Thank you so much, Chelsey. Thank you everyone for joining us this morning. We have events once a month, so please follow us on social media as well. And we look forward to seeing everyone next month.
Thank you, Samantha. Thank you, Creative Mornings. And thank you for everyone who tuned in. This was a blast, a beautiful way to start my day, connecting with people who want to take time to listen to me. So I appreciate this very much. Thank you, Samantha, for making it super seamless and very easy to do.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, guys. Have a wonderful Friday.
Bye.